program is brought to you in association with First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?
The concept of employment is such that a contractual agreement is drawn between employee and employer, stipulating the conditions under which work will be carried out. Specified in these agreements are the working hours, remuneration, any other benefits which may include contributory medical aid benefits, pension, and any other allowances such as a car allowance and/or a phone, and in some instances, annual bonuses. While these contracts are meant to clear any blurred lines that may cause confusion, especially where expectations are concerned, it does happen every now and again to have squabbles between employee and employer. Take, for example, the case between the world's largest producers of rough diamonds and its employees in 2004. The mine had offered its employees a 10% increment on monthly salaries and a 10% increase on annual bonuses. The employees, however, wanted a 16% increase on their salaries with a 25% increase on annual bonuses. There was, of course, an impasse, which led to miners going on a strike. The employees argued that the mine made a substantial profit and so their demands could easily be met. Needless to say, the employees lost their argument following a court ruling. Some 400 employees were fired after failing to report to work, with hundreds more sent for disciplinary hearings and action. To give context, in the first half of 2004, the mine's subsidiary partner's net profit was $341 million, up from $270 million in the same period the previous year. From this, one would assume that the employees were well justified in making their demands. But as we've come to learn, the issue is not as black and white as there are some areas of grey. In tonight's installment of First Issues, we engage human resource specialist Stuart White to help us clear the mist surrounding employee expectations versus the organization's profits, with the aforementioned example as our case study. Stuart, thank you so much for coming here on First Issues. It's always a pleasure having you. We're talking today about employee expectations, or rather balancing employees' expectations with the organization's bottom line. And we want to find out from you, should employees ever negotiate their contracts based off of how much the employer has made at any given time?
I think that employees will always use how much the employer has made and how successful the employer has been as a bargaining chip, for sure, because the employees know that they are inevitably part of the success. And if they decide not to play ball or not to be as cooperative or not to be as hardworking, they're going to definitely affect the profits and the success of the organization. So definitely employees must use it and do use it, especially when there's bargaining. In other words, when you have a trade union and the trade union can present those arguments to the employer. Look how much you made last year. We want to share in some of those profits. We want to have some of those successes passed on to us.
One may feel that it is a bit unfair, that employees work hard to achieve deliverables and surpass that target, for them to not be heard when they want to negotiate better pay, which then comes down to the contracts, which brings me to my next question. What do we need to understand in general about employment contracts?
With regards to the employment contract, we need to understand the basis of the contract. And that is that an employee enters into an arrangement with an employer to produce XYZ in terms of their labor, their work, their skills, their knowledge, their creativity. And in return for that, there's a contract agreement that they will be paid XYZ, they will get these benefits, etc. That's the contract. And it's always interesting when employees want to raise, I want more money because you did well, even though that is not included in the contract. So unless there's an agreement at the start of the contract that you will get XYZ if we achieve more than budget, etc., then that's not part of the arrangement at that moment. So if we want to turn it the other way, then, if the company was to make a loss, would the employees be wanting to share in the loss? So would they be then willing to take a drop in salary? You know what I mean? That's the relationship in terms of the risk. The employer carries all the risk. In other words, regardless of whether we make profits or not, we will pay you this. And sometimes we don't make profits. It is, however, a negotiable area because we find that. So, for example, in this recent period that we've just gone through with COVID-19, the contract said exactly one thing: we will pay you. But employers had to sit down and then renegotiate with the employees. We don't have enough work. Are you prepared to take less salary? You can work less. So everything is negotiable because it's a relationship. So the contract is only the basis of the relationship, but there is room to wiggle. So even though I have a contract with you to provide work as an employee, I can also choose to withhold that labor within the contract legally. I can work slower. I can work with less energy. I can not give my all. So these are the rooms of the areas of wiggle. And smart employers and smart employees will know that if they can come to the table and negotiate those things which are negotiable, because both parties want something out of the relationship, then you're maybe able to get a little bit more of the profits, and maybe the employer's prepared to give you a little bit more. But those are the areas of negotiation.
Stuart, in cases where there are shareholders, right, who takes precedence when it comes to profit share? Is it the employee or the shareholder, and why?
Definitely the shareholder, because the shareholders are the owners of the business. Yeah. They're the ones who've invested the money. They're the ones who've taken the risk. Those are the ones that will carry the losses, if that's the case may be. So the employee is just and I don't mean just because they're the most important thing, because they help produce it, but their contract is different. They're not putting anything into it. They're putting their labor in return for a fixed salary. Mm-hmm. It just would make sense for employers to know that the difference between motivated and unmotivated employees is quite significant. Therefore, if we can have our employees feeling motivated because they're getting a cut of the profits, they're likely to work harder for those profits. I think that the problem is that the employees forget the contractual relationship. You know what I mean? They don't always think of it in that terms. And that's because, understandably, that the employees sometimes are working so hard in the organization that the organization's work is their work because they care so much. And when they care so much, they feel, I made that money. Well, you didn't actually make that money, because it's the entrepreneur that creates the opportunity for the money to be made. Whether it's a mining company or whatever, they're the ones who do the investing. They're the ones that have the vision. They have the dream. They orchestrate it. They plan it. So the hardest, complicated part of the relationship is normally sitting with the management and the shareholders, because that work is more complex and therefore has more value, and that's why there's something there, or more value seen to be there.
Well, then, how can employers manage their employees' expectations during any period of the life cycle of employment?
I think it's just what you said about managing expectations. When we enter into any relationship, whether it's a marriage or a business relationship, it's very important up front to know what either party is going to bring to the relationship and what the expectations of the other party is. So when you enter into the relationship, be clear about whether there will be profit sharing or opportunities to share in the profits. If that is upfront and told at the beginning, then maybe there will not be as much disappointment when it's not there. But I think there's another thing that's very important, and that is the idea of equity and fairness. It's very hard if you are not paying your workers a decent wage and they are working extremely hard and you are making millions and billions and billions and you're not passing at least a trickle of that over. because that is going to breed a deep level of dissatisfaction. I don't think that employees are overly greedy. I don't think that they want too much. But I do think that when they see millions and billions being made and they do not understand how the books are balanced. So in other words, employees think that you're making so much money, but in actual fact, at the end of the day, there can be very little money for the shareholders. And we don't talk about that. We don't discuss that. We don't talk about economics with our employees. So they just see the money coming in and thinking the manager's taking it home in the evening in the briefcase, without understanding that once the books are balanced, there can be very little there. And that if the shareholder is not happy on what they're going to get out of it, the shareholder may take their money and invest somewhere else with different employees in a different business. So understanding that and understanding expectations and what both parties want from the relationship needs to be spoken about and needs to be explained.